Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Fahad and welcome to the first episode of the Thought Pod. And I'm really honored and delighted to have with me a very good friend, colleague and mentor, Dr. Amjad Pervez, joining me for this very first episode. I've had the pleasure and privilege of traveling with Dr. Amjad, working with him on several projects, and he's an absolutely inspiring human being, selfless to the core. And today we'll be unraveling, and discovering his personal story, what makes him who he is, and what inspires him in life, and hopefully get to learn from his experiences and successes. Thank you so much, Dr. Amjad, for joining us today. I know it's Ramadan as well.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor and a pleasure, Fahad, to see you again and to converse with you. And Ramadan Mubarak to you and your loved ones, and to all the viewers across the world who are celebrating Ramadan. May Allah protect you and guide you and forgive us our sins, and may accept the sacrifices that we're making during this Ramadan.
Absolutely, and such a beautiful prayer to kickstart our conversation as well. And just for people who are not aware of your journey, Dr. Amjad, can you briefly tell us, about your personal story and how you came about to where you are today in life?
Okay, so I think every human being's story starts with their parents. So my parents and their ancestors migrated from Baramulla in occupied Indian Kashmir to Pakistan. My father joined the then British India Army, saw action in Burma, won loads of medals from King George, etc. But after the Second World War, as you know, the wartime economy of Britain was shattered. It needed cheap labor to regenerate it. And the soldiers from across the Commonwealth Army, from the African, Caribbean, and the Asian Peninsula, poured into UK to rejuvenate the economy. So my father came to UK in the 60s. I came to UK as a child back in 1969 I hail from Punjab, district Jhelum, but obviously I lived about 2 years in Karachi before I came to UK. I got educated here. My father originally came to London, but at that time Bradford was the epicenter. It was one of the richest cities in Europe, not just in UK. So my father moved here, so I got educated here, went to University of Huddersfield, I went into financial services, then set up my small startup here in Bradford, which grew to be one of the largest food service companies. And you may not know this, Fahad. We've now part of the Bestway Group, which is a £5 billion pound company. I retired 15, 16 years ago. It was my ambition to retire at the age of 50. I did a lot of work with the government, as you remember, with the ecosystem of enterprise, with the local enterprise partnership. Then I went into the NHS, did about 4 or 5 years. And then in 2018, when Imran's government came, I moved to Pakistan, became chairman of Jumpstart Pakistan, where you and the University of Bradford were our key kind of anchor. We had 30 chapters across the globe. It was an amazing journey. And then obviously COVID came. I came back to UK. Now, currently, I have interest across Middle East. I'm chairman of a company called High Tech Engineering in Riyadh. We're into all sorts of different stuff. But in Pakistan, I am Director of Strategy and Internationalization at University of Lahore, which is one of the largest private sector universities with 45,000 students. I'm the founder and CEO of the Innovation Hub there, which looks at creating the ecosystem of enterprise in Pakistan. And through that initiative, I'm currently working with 180 universities in Pakistan. And about 3 months ago, and I'll finish on this, it's a bit of a long introduction. I became chairman of UKEC Pakistan. You know, UKEC is one of the largest organizations that brings students from across the globe. So I chair the organization, Pakistan arm, and we're hoping to grow that globally. And I'm currently sat in UK in Bradford, whilst you're sat in Dubai.
Excellent. And I guess one of the things that sort of stands out from your journey is the journeys that you've taken, you know, moving from Pakistan to the UK at an early stage, and then developing yourself, inventing yourself and creating yourself in the UK, working a lot in Pakistan as well. And now you're saying, you know, as you've mentioned, you've got a lot of interests in the Middle East as well. So tell me, in terms of navigating through cultures, languages, ways of doing business, ways of operating, how has that been for you in terms of, you know, finding your true identity in the midst of all of that?
That's an interesting question, and I think a lot of companies and people find that to be the most difficult aspect of actually growing themselves and thus growing their organizations. But for me, I take my mother's philosophy, which was that a stranger is a friend that you've not yet met. Okay, it's not a stranger, it's somebody that you avoid and they're going to kind of kidnap you or do something horrible to you. So if you have that open mind about other cultures and you're not rigid about your values, you must honor your values, you must honor your culture. But that doesn't mean that you disrespect other people's beliefs or value systems. And when you respect other people, Fahad, I think what you will find is a common ground of humanity, right? Before you do any negotiations, whether it's business negotiations, governmental negotiations, because I've worked in the private sector and the public sector, I think you've got to find that space of trust where you learn about the other person. Because if you don't learn about the other person, if you don't understand their values, what is sacred to them, what is, you know, really valuable to them, what they respect and what they don't respect, you're really not going to be able to get on with that person or that institution, right? So there's the personal institutions of culture, and then there's institutional cultures. So I think as a person who wants to succeed, whether it's locally, regionally, nationally, or globally, I think the starting point has to be that you're open-minded, and you are, you know, you're willing to learn and tolerate other people's beliefs and systems, and that way I think you will get on in the world. And I believe I learned that Bradford is a very diverse city. It houses 72 communities. Yeah. So I think I'm fortunate to be living in a city like Dubai, you know, where there's a lot of different communities, and you need to get on with each other. So I think that would be the lesson that I would pass on to any budding entrepreneurs and people who wish to, you know, be global citizens, which they need to be successful nowadays.
And do you think this is something that you can sort of learn and adopt as you go along, or is it something inherently ingrained in human beings, you know, depending on their education systems or the family backgrounds or the way they've been, raised in their environments, or is it something that, you know, can very easily be, you know, adopted as well?
So I think, look, you know, when we're raised as children, you're predominantly been indoctrinated by the family's value systems, family's culture, and maybe family's religious beliefs. So your foundations are very tribal. Yeah, you start from that. So I think as you grow older, and I think one of the problems that we find in Bradford is a lot of the communities live in their silos. Yeah, they go to a particular school, they go to a particular madrasa, they associate with a certain group of people, and they don't actually interact with the wider world or the wider communities. I think it's your attitude to learn and attitude to be open-minded, which is going to overcome your earlier indoctrinations. And I, as a student, traveled a lot, and then as a businessman, because I was in charge of developing our international kind of value chain and supply chain. I learned that through the hard knocks of life. Because if you don't tolerate other people, you're not going to get a good deal. So I think the lesson is be open-minded and be, don't speak too much, don't kind of take over the first meetings, try to listen more and speak less. So that's the way forward, I think.
And you've mentioned Jumpstart Pakistan. Obviously, within your career, you've worked in many different industries. You started with your family business, which was sort of a corner shop, and then you went into your food side of things, and then you worked a lot with the local governments, the universities. You're currently in steel and all sorts of other things in the Middle East. And obviously with Jumpstart as well, it was all about technology, AI, the future. So as someone who's sort of seen the technology evolve, when you might have first started after your high school or your university, the technology that we would maybe have access to was very, very different to what it is today. So what has your sort of experience been navigating through those challenges where the way we communicate, the way we travel, the way we do business was very different 30, 20, 50 years ago, and now it's completely different. And we're sort of at a stage where we're trying to imagine how the future is going to look like. We're trying to train our students and our young people. So as someone who's seen it all from different sides, what has your personal experience been on this?
So when I started business, it was 1984, 85. Yeah, it was the beginning of the internet revolution. It was, it was the beginning of email. It was the beginning of the internet had just come in. When I was at university, the big IBMs had come in, but they were not as agile or advanced or as miniature as your iPhones or your other phone technology and now the AI technology. So I think, again, coming back to our previous discussion, if one is rigid and doesn't adopt innovation, creativity, and the disruption that is coming, then you're going to be stuck in a silo. If you're in a growth market, the probability is that you may survive, but will you scale to the level of your ability? I don't think so. So I think at that stage, if you wanted to find a supplier, you had to fly out to China, you had to fly out to Malaysia, you had to fly out to Turkey, India, wherever you thought the best suppliers were. And at that stage, you really didn't have online directories or stuff like that. You physically had to go to big exhibitions and literally walk through the exhibitions, go one by one to the exhibitions or go through the directory and hope that you would find the right suppliers. Right? So you really couldn't do a lot of the work beforehand. So it was trial, test and trial, test and trial. But I think very early on, again, it's the personality. I'm a very kind of outward kind of person. I'm not an introvert, a geeky type person. So I'm a very kind of social animal. So we adopted as a company very early the technological revolution that was coming. In fact, I would say for a small to medium-sized company, we were ahead of the curve in the food service industry, and that's why we beat the existing kind of companies who were there, because they were rigid in terms of their supply chain, in terms of their marketing, in terms of their recruitment and their global supply chain. So I think, again, the lesson is that, adopting technology, adopting automation now is something that is keeping every CEO awake at night, because there will be somebody, a smart kid somewhere in a room with an iPhone or an iPad, right, who's thinking of something, and with the help of AI, he's going to disrupt your market in a way that is going to be catastrophic if you do not adopt technology and this disruptive ways of doing business. So I think those people who are rigid in their thinking and not adoptive to creativity and innovation are going to find that they are left behind, and they will end up in museums of unsuccessful ventures.
And in the theme of today's conversation, I thought would have been endeavor, entrepreneurship, and excellence, and I think that sort of denotes your own journey as well. In terms of being persistent and not being afraid of venturing into different industries. And one area that you're personally quite passionate about, I think, is higher education. In terms of giving back. So you were quite involved with the work that University of Bradford was doing, for example, also in Pakistan, University of Lahore. I mean, there is, with technology, like you were saying in your previous answer, obviously things are changing and being disruptive, disrupted, and the entire brick and mortar image of universities of the past, that is being challenged quite a lot, where there is a school of thought now that sort of is very much against the concept of formal universities, and particularly in the West, where students find themselves in a lot of debt, in their choice of studying in university. Obviously, countries like Pakistan, the families have to foot the bill, and it is quite expensive. So what is your take, obviously, as an entrepreneur who's been in the field, doing business, but also on the peripheries of education as a visiting professor at the University of Lahore, an honorary doctorate from the University of Bradford, interacting with academia and students? What is your personal take on the future of universities?
So if you look at the development of humankind and the emergence of civilizations, Fahad, those civilizations that emerged were the ones who cherished education, free thought, and thus the creativity that came out of those two elements. They adopted that, whether it was in military, whether it was to uplift people from poverty and thus create better systems of civilized society. So if you go back to Alexander the Great, through to Egyptian Empire, Byzantine Empire, Roman Empire, then obviously the British Empire across the globe. Now, a lot of them were very colonial and imperialistic, and they did a lot of damage. But I think the fundamental thing that we've got to remember, that whether it's an individual or society, education, creativity, and innovations are the key to success. So if we agree that, then I think the way to move forward from that is, why is it that education has become so toxic and commercialized? And for my, it's the bane of my life, because I'm somebody who was, my family wasn't very rich. We were very poor when we came to UK, and more like most families who came to UK or who migrated for economic reasons, right? And I think my father, being in the army and who had traveled the world, instilled in us, right? Because he'd seen the world, that those individuals who were educated, who had the skills who had open minds progressed in society. So even though he wasn't that much educated, he knew the value of education, and he made sure that every one of his kids went to university. And by the way, when I went to university, I got paid to go to university. Right? Can you imagine the difference? And that's why poor kids, like, from societies or communities like I was in, had that opportunity to go. Will they be able to go? The kids from those poor backgrounds be able to go to have that same opportunity? I'm afraid not. I think what's gone wrong is this notion of scarcity, that we've got to keep the doctors scarce so the wages stay high, that we've got to keep the dentists scarce, and we should only educate so many seats in a university, right? I think is ludicrous, because if you look across the globe, if you look at the health issues, the sanitation issues, if you look at all the problems we face, we should be training as many people as we can, as cheaply as we can, as more effectively. But you see, then there is another element. The institutions of the universities, and you've been involved with some, and so have I, the layers of administration. So you have the lecturer, and then you have senior, junior professors, then you have the deans, and then, head of departments, and chancellors, vice chancellors, right? So this hierarchical structure, and those people don't come cheap. So I think, coming back to this adoption of technology, agility, and actually creating this disruption, people have realized that these institutions are no longer for the benefit of the whole of the community, but they're more elitist. And that, I think, right, whenever an entrepreneur sees a problem, which education or further education in the world is, right, then there is, other people. So if you look at Khan Academy, there are various other, ULearn, Future Learn, and all sorts of different platforms which are now disrupting. And when I meet the chancellors and the vice chancellors and people from further education, they're absolutely petrified at the revolution that's coming, right? So instead of being petrified, why don't you take the hard decisions and go back to your core values of developing the humankind, not just the elite development of human capital? You've got to uplift the humanity in total. Right? When you do that, that is a much bigger kind of vision in terms of what you're trying to do. And that would give us, I think, much more educated people across the globe. And I'm hoping from that education, we would have much more critical thinkers, right, who could challenge the leaders across the globe who continuously want to have these perpetual, nonsensical wars who only serve the elites in this world. So I think we're at a point where something has to give, and I think these elite institutions will have to give, and they will die their death, and some of them are already. I mean, a lot of the universities in UK and across the globe are now facing humongous financial problems.
Yeah, and just touching up on your final point there on obviously university structures, and if you just look at UK, for example, the funding structures are a bit complex. Brexit had a major impact on university fundings, and then a lot of them are heavily reliant on international students, international postgraduate students, and the tuition fees that comes from that. And as we look at things unfolding across the world in terms of geopolitics and currency devaluations, etc., obviously that has a direct impact on the number of international students coming to the UK, and we're seeing now that many universities are in difficult positions. And I mean, in your view, what would work? Like, what would an ideal structure for universities to look like? Would it be a private sort of format, or because currently the governments are still heavily investing in the universities, but at the same time the students are also having to pay tuition fees and get loans, etc. International student fees already are quite high. So fundamentally, looking at the structures or the financial viability of universities. What is your view on that?
Okay, first, so if you look across the globe, and if you look at what is happening in terms of the technological revolution, yeah, so the technological revolution is going to mean, more of things being done by AI and less by human beings. So the lecturers, the teachers who were once sort of the bearers of knowledge, that is no longer the case. So I think the status of the lecturers and the teachers, and thus the institutions that teach education or impart education, is going to go through a rapid kind of transformation. I see the role of lecturers and teachers as mentors and guiders, right? Technology will take care of imparting of knowledge. So it will be a lot cheaper. And for my part, I think that is for the better, because it will be more updated and research-led rather than regurgitation of what the lecturer has learned when he was going through the education. So I think that's the first thing that's going to happen. So delivering of education material and knowledge is going to become far more cheaper. I think where the fundamental problem of entrenchment is the institutions, the physical institutions that we've built in terms of the buildings, the equipment, etc., which is the old model of teaching education. That also is going to the scrap heap. So more of virtual learning, more of kind of use of technology is going to happen. So a lot of these people who are currently against this kind of education, this renewed kind of technology-based education, are either going to retire or they're going to be redundant. So I think once that happens, that means education knowledge will become cheaper, and in fact it will be freely available. Like I said, if you look at Khan Academy, you can go from primary school to go on to do a PhD absolutely free. And there are a lot of models of free universities that offer students free education, and when they actually graduate, they then pay something back. So I think fundamentally we're moving, but I think there's a bigger element that we need to discuss, which is it is not just the suppliers of developed human capital that matter, which is the colleges and the university, but it's the industry. So if you look across the globe now, higher apprenticeship degrees, where a student spends maybe bulk of their time, but only spends a little time at university, and that actually attendance at university doesn't have to be physical; it's virtual. So I think we're moving towards almost to a hybrid system, which is coming. So I think the quicker we bite the bullet, that is going to become cheaper. So I think what needs to happen, individuals who can afford it, so it needs to be mean tested, need to go private, because rather than paying 9,000 or 16,000, which is currently for international students and local students, I think degrees are going to come down to maybe 2,000, 1,000 pound a term. Right? They need to come down to that level so ordinary people can afford that privately. Those that can't but have the talent and the acumen and the wish to, they should be subsidized by society. Why? Because we've got a duty, right? We have a social duty to uplift those individuals who are born into inequality. And whether that's across the globe in deprived countries, or whether in the deprived communities in developed economies like UK, is something that we need to really deeply research. And I think that I think another thing is research itself, social research itself, is the domain of the elites. It's like, Grant Thornton's, Deloitte's of this world. I think it needs to come from organizations who are working at the ground level, right? So we have a hybrid kind of research-based model, which is, reflects the input of ordinary people rather than people who are just kind of career consultants.
Absolutely. And Dr. Amjad, I wanted to ask you, like, obviously in terms of the different countries that you've worked in, three that sort of stick out for me personally, obviously it's the UK, Pakistan, and then maybe the Middle East. What I'd like to know is, in your view, could you give us, as an entrepreneur, as an academic, as someone who's deeply invested in these three broad regions, what are the key main trends or opportunities to look out for in Pakistan, in the UK, and then maybe the GCC as well, in your view?
Okay, I'll start with Pakistan because you know how passionate I am because that's where I was born. Uh, I think we have a humongous opportunity. Yeah, the population bulk geographically we're in the center of the world, from Alexander the Great to the superpowers. Always, right, Pakistan has been at the center of the world in terms of strategic location. And I think more so now, Fahad, because since 2001 and the war on terror, where the Western political entities and kind of blocks like the European Union, America, right, focused on anti-terrorism, rightly so, but they took their eye off in terms of technology development, in terms of education, etc., infrastructure development. And what happened, Asia, Middle East, and particularly China, actually focused on growing their economies and thus growing their infrastructure, whether it was social infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, or defense infrastructure. So we were roughly about 30 years where the West has taken the eye off the ball. But unfortunately, because of our governance kind of irregularities in Pakistan, we have missed the electric revolution, we've missed the computer revolution, and if we're not careful, we're going to miss this, artificial intelligence race. So I think huge opportunities, but we've got to put our house in order. And we've got to put our image in order in terms of that we're a corrupt nation, we can't do business properly, and in terms of being safe, right? So there are a lot of ifs to it, and with what is currently happening, I am kind of really worried that we're not heading in the right direction. So that's my opinion on Pakistan. But with 15 million overseas Pakistanis embedded in the most developed economies, right? It doesn't take a genius, right? And as you realize what we were doing at Jumpstart Pakistan, right? Within kind of 3 years, we moved from terrorism to tourism, and the image that we kind of transformed was, unbelievable. But then obviously all these things have happened. Let's move to the Middle East. I remember vividly when I was young at university, a lot of the people from Middle East used to come to Europe to do their shopping, to buy their properties, etc. But they were made to look like jokers. Everybody was doing jokes about the sheikhs and how they've, threw their money about. But come 30, 35, 40 years down the line, the second generation and the third generation are now very proud of their identity, very clear about their vision. So if you look at Saudi Arabia's 2030 vision, right? So they're now obviously developing their own ecosystems of enterprise, and they have the funds. If you look at what is happening in Qatar, all of the countries, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc. The advantage they have again is that they have the petrochemical industries, which is the base for generating the revenues that they need. I've got national wealth funds which they've used to invest across the globe, so they're getting huge returns from that. And they're now investing in the new technologies like crazy. And as you know, in the region, non-oil and gas-based industries are growing faster than the traditional industries. So I reckon, and their respect and multiculturalism is an asset that is bringing a lot of world's talent. A lot of the world's millionaires from the West are moving there because of taxation, crime, and because we've not invested in the infrastructure. Now, if I move to UK, post Brexit, I think when we moved out of Brexit and we're beginning to realize now with Trump coming in and what the political situation is with Ukraine, etc., I think we committed commercial suicide. And secondly, I think governments, successive governments, because I've lived there since 1969, and particularly the elite who govern us, have not got out of the mindset. They still think they own the empire. They still think and govern in terms as though UK PLC still rules the world, which it doesn't. So every time USA says to us, "Oh, we're going to war," we're the first one to send troops, bombs, money, you name it. So what has happened? Our infrastructure and education. I've been in the NHS for at least 5 years. I served in the NHS. It is crumbling, right? So I think we have got huge challenges. A lot of the young people, talented people, are now leaving for the Middle East or going across the globe. But still, I think there is a huge opportunity. A, because we're an open society. B, if we got a governance like Pakistan, and realize that we've got to focus on our own development rather than trying to fight all these fights across the globe. Which now I think the Europeans have realized that this alliance with the USA over the last 30 years, where there's completely reliant on the USA, right, is now coming back to bite them. So I think out of all these regions, I think Asia, Far East, Middle East are the regions that I reckon, unless there is God forbid, there's a World War III, the way Trump is, bellicosting and, warmongering, I hope to God there isn't a third world war, because we're on the brink of it every time he opens his mouth. I think those are the regions to look for, because the old economies and the old civilizations, I think they've had their days and they've given too much of a gap, like I said, 30 years since 2001, right? And I think it's too late for them to catch up. They can catch up, Fad, right? Rather than being adversarial and saying China is our enemy and we're going to do this, and, rather than absolutely being adversarial, like their foreign minister saying, you're not even on the table, you're on the menu, right? So all this talk of, where America and the Western world used to be the only power, now you've got a world which is unique power. And the sooner they come to their senses, I think the better it will be for humanity and the world. But will they come to that? That is something I think is a dangerous kind of thing that we've got to watch.
Yeah. And my final question to you, Dr. Amjad, in terms of the sectors and the opportunities to look out for in the future. So it's a two-part question. One is obviously, what are the sectors and areas that you see most amount of growth in? And, young people, if they're looking at potential opportunities to grow in the future, what are the areas that they should be sort of investing in or learning about or focusing on? And my second question is, how would you imagine, like, in your view, 2050, the world in 2050, how would it look like?
Okay. I'll start with your last question first, and then I'll come to the first sentence, yeah? I pray in the month of Ramadan that the leaders of this world, rather than being egotistic, they come to their senses. We are all sons and daughters of Adam, and we all bleed red. Yeah, our DNA structure is exactly the same. Yeah, and we all need to learn the lesson from Alexander the Great when he died and he said, right, keep my hands out, my feet out. And he made the best doctors in the world carry his coffin, and his exchequers were throwing money as his coffin was going. And he said, somebody said, why would you want to do that? And he said, All the money in the world could not save me. The best physicians couldn't save me. Right? I've come empty-handed and I'm going to go empty-handed. So we need to actually look at the purpose, particularly the leaders across the globe, whichever field they are in terms of, whether they're political leaders, economic leaders, whatever leaders they are, they need to reflect on the legacy that they leave for humankind, not just for themselves and their families. So this greed, me, is got to go, and we've got to be more philosophically orientated in terms of our vision. Now, that is something that education needs to adopt in terms of values, in terms of resilience and understanding. So I think my hope is that if we bring these changes, 2050 would be an idyllic world where we live, where everything is done by technology, by robots, and humans, right, come together with their creativity, initiative, right, to create a better world. And we not only will be living on planet Earth, but we will have become a species that has conquered space, travel, time travel, etc. So that is my dream. And I think the advances in technology and AI and supercomputing and quantum computing will allow us to solve those problems and hopefully benefit not just few, but whole of humanity. And maybe we may even find some more life forms across the uniform. Coming back to the centers where young people should be looking to. Everybody's talking about technology, artificial intelligence. Clearly, I'd be stupid not to say this, that irrespective of which area you choose, whether it's arts, legal work, whether it's social work, you need to be completely aware of the disruptiveness of technology. And like we started at the beginning of the conversation, you need to be open, adaptive, and continuous learning is the mode that you should take, right? Because if you don't, you will most certainly will be left behind and you will be poorer as a result of that. So what other areas do I advocate? I think post-COVID, people have realized is that the kind of food we eat and the kind of medicine that we take is something that is critical. So I think agriculture, particularly organic food as medicine, is going to be enormously popular, which it is at the moment. Then I think well-being, preventative medicine, personal care is going to be extremely important. You've heard about all this research that's been done on anti-aging, etc. So people need to get into biotechnology in a way that's never been done before. And then I think really, working for somebody, employment. And I've been, Fad, you've known me most of, kind of for the last 15, 20 years, right? I personally believe working for somebody else doesn't make sense to me. When you're working for somebody else, you're not delivering your own vision. You don't have the freedom. If you're working 8 hours a day, you get tired, right? And even if you have the money, you're not going to be able to live the life that you want, the dreams. So I say to people, have you got a book of dreams? And they say, what do you mean? And I said, do you want to travel the world? Do you want to educate yourself? Do you want to be the best son? Do you want to be the best father? Right? How are you going to do that with a wage? So I'm hoping to God with technology and all these innovation hubs and accelerators and everything that's happening across the globe, right? People take up enterprise, because in the future, personalized services, goods and services are going to become the norm, right? As we learn more about our differences, people will want individualistic medicine, individualistic clothes, food, etc. So this is the opportunity time for young people. And that is why, at the age of 66, right, I'm traveling the world, working with, universities across particularly, I don't work with people of my age. not because I feel, I don't want to work with them, because most of them are stuck in those, all the stuff that we talked about, these universities and how they need to be, adoptive. They're not adoptive. And people who are not adoptive, I have an allergy to them, right? So that I work with people who are adoptive, who come up with new ideas, who are challenging, right? And that's the young people. So these young people need to adopt enterprise as a way of liberation, right? Because that will give them the power, right, and the knowledge to live their dreams for them and their families. And if they do that, they will, enrich society, enrich the world. So we as human beings can kind of communicate and live together peacefully.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Amjad, for your time and for your inspiring insights as always. It was an absolute pleasure conversing with you today. And thank you to all our viewers for watching the first episode of the Thought Pod. It's a platform where we'll be exploring ideas, stories, journeys, and experiences. Stay tuned.
Thank you.